decide whether it's all this mechanism, this physical, biological mechanism that produces everything about us, our personalities, everything, as we said before. We don't really know that. So, just to say as well, we don't really do religion or politics on our podcast because we don't like to be controversial. Inevitably, perhaps if we're talking about something like a soul, you may feel that there's a slight overlap with religion, but that's not the thrust of what we're trying to say here. We're simply trying to say, do we have something, we call it a soul, that sits alongside our physical being somewhere inside us, and that ultimately is also or mainly responsible for the good that we do, the decency, the things that we are, rather than just this mechanism of physical biology. It's worth saying that when they research these things, which they do quite regularly, a majority of people on the planet believe we have a soul, which is quite an interesting thought. And a majority of neuroscientists, not everyone, but a majority, don't believe we have a soul. Now, there's not really evidence for or against having a soul, but if anything, a neuroscientist would say, well, we see the mechanics of what is happening, and therefore we don't really believe there is such a thing as a soul. So with all that in mind, and bearing in mind your pillow talk, Cuz, let me have your view. What do you think? Do you think we have a soul, or are we just a physical being?
Yeah, just before I get to that, you got me in a really nice romantic mood, and I'm thinking, woo, I'm gonna get.
I soon got rid of that, didn't I?
and then you just
was,
slapped me down. You just dropped me from a height. Oh yeah.
well, that's the reality, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, go on.
So anyway, yeah. So do we have a soul? I think some people would take it further, wouldn't they? So some people would say we have three things in our body. They would say the soul, the spirit, and the body. Some people would go that far, and some people would just stop short at a soul and a spirit. And some people would say, well, hang on a minute, do we really have a spirit? I think it's just the body and the soul is the spirit. However, the simple analogy that I go with is this. So you've got an electronic device, right? On its own, it's rubbish. But when you power it on via battery or you pass some electrical current into it, then it comes alive, don't it? Be it a fan, television, whatever. Now, when you look at the body, right, it's just a piece of clay. It soon decays and turns into sand or whatever, and then you have the carcass, which is like whatever is left of it, maybe the bones, if it's not crushed or if it's not cremated. And when you
You are, we're going down a depressing route here, Cuz.
well, you got me
Let's
started on it.
keep it real, keep it light.
You got me started on it. You started me on this romantic, beautiful, romantic route, and then you took me down all these contours
Fair
that
enough,
I don't know.
Cuz.
Yeah.
Fair comment.
Yeah. So anyway, so I think, and I might be biased because I do have knowledge of a spiritual background, but I might be. But on the analogy that we have as humans and the things around us, I think there's only two things. One is the spirit, right? There's only two things. One is the spirit, right? Which is sort of the electric current that powers whatever is in us, the spirit. And then we have the soul or body, call it whatever. So I would merge the body and soul into one, right? and there would be the spirit. So the soul, because if you separate the soul, bruv, if you separate the soul, then you have a problem, right? So, because the spirit is separated anyway. The spirit is what goes in and out. And when it expires, it just goes out one last time and never comes back in. And that's the spirit. Now, the soul is, if you separate the soul from the body, then you have a really big problem. Where do you put the soul? You've separated it from the body. Where does it go? Where are you going to place it? What is the soul? Right? And that's a very big question, and it's very complex. So that's why I would put the soul and the body in one, because then everything else dies. Everything else dies except the spirit. So that's my own opinion. A little bit biased, but yeah, it is.
Okay, I mean, what you're saying, put the body and the soul together, but that again is making the assumption that we have something called a soul, isn't it? I mean, you've given another dimension here by saying we may have a body, soul, and spirit, but the body and the soul is as one. I mean, for me, I think I would, if I were going along with the spirit idea, I would say the spirit is another name for the soul. I mean, that's how I would see that.
Oh, wow.
So,
There you go.
but yes, the assumption that the body and the soul go together, I don't quite get that. As I say, for the reason I said, I would think a soul or a spirit, whether we have a soul and a spirit, as I say, for me, that's one and the same thing. But yeah, you're right in terms of what happens to the body and so on. But to think of this as we're trying to stick to this idea, though, that do we have a soul? Is the soul responsible for our personalities and everything about us? And is the body just a backup engine that's doing all the heavy lifting, if you like? So, we can ask that sort of question. But I think there's a couple of problems there, because what happens, I'll tell you a situation, the story that was in the paper, the Boston Post in America, a good few years ago. I think it was possibly in the war years or in the 40s. I don't quite remember. But there was a guy called Phineas